That's the annual fee resolution. We just changed the date to the February 1st.
Good morning, everyone. We'll call our meeting to order at 10 a.m. First agenda item, is there any public comment for items not on our agenda? Hearing none, we will go right into the regular agenda. Old business, and it's an action item today, is the attorney request for proposal. Steve, thank you very much for putting that together.
You're welcome.
Let's.
Any questions?
But you did a good job, Steve.
I agree.
Well, I got help for the kids, so.
Yes, son.
Who's an honest to God lawyer? So.
Yeah.
All right, do I have a motion on the attorney RFP?
I moved to so.
Second.
Yeah, it's been motioned and seconded. Is there any public comment on this item? Board discussion. So I have a list.
Do you have, well, do you have?
I've added to it by 2 attorneys. I'll circulate this around as a potential list of attorneys to send us RFP out to. Yeah, I'll just email this to you for this meeting so you have. There it is. Okay. You guys are ahead of me. Part of, I guess the way I would envision this unrolling, and this is for discussion with the board, is we can have another subcommittee of 2 of us work on, we'll send the RFP out, the deadline to respond, and then have a subcommittee go through those responses, interview attorneys, and come forward with recommendations. Does that align with what you're thinking? Okay.
So is that me and you?
Yeah, let's figure out. We got some people on every subcommittee, so maybe we can figure this out. But right now, I just think the motion right now is to approve the RFP.
Well, we did that, didn't we?
No, we have the motion. We're still in the motion and second. We're in discussion. So I'll call the vote. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I believe, in my opinion, this is to the board, this list is not exhaustive. It's a compilation of some thoughts Steve had, and I got some recommendations. If there's others that come to light, I don't want to.
Just comments.
Yeah.
We got 2 people on here for BKBH.
One in Bozeman, one in Helena.
I understand.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a burn.
I was thinking Bozeman make a little bit more sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I've also looked into Amy and the Christensen Prizeau opportunity. She's basically an employment lawyer.
Okay.
Labor stuff. So, and also located in Helena.
Jane's here. What if he has a suggestion?
Thanks, Jane.
Yeah, is it Jane Person? Isn't that what Yellowstone's?
Yes. Jane Merson is our attorney.
Yeah. In Bozeman.
Okay.
Right.
She interviewed last night, but then withdrew.
Why is she withdrawn?
I can't remember exactly. I don't know if she saw. I think she saw a conflict, a potential conflict being 2 different resorts.
Well, I think the other thing we ought to talk about is Crowley Fleck is the attorney of record for Big Sky Resort. So whether they choose to do it or choose to decline because of a conflict, I think we can ask the question and let them give us an answer, but I'm just putting that out there as far as the list that we've got so far.
And by the way, Lone Mountain Land Company also does a lot of work with
Crowley Fleck.
Crowley Fleck and Nate Good specifically. So, but we'll see.
I understand. Yeah.
It's not enough to find an attorney who's conflicted.
So
I guess my thought is that we appoint a subcommittee to go ahead and vet list of who
Gotcha.
this RFP goes out to, is so that subcommittee could work on refining this list, but this is a good
Cool.
start. And then send the RFP out, and then have them prior to coming to this board with a recommendation. Trying to think of all the subcommittees everybody's on here.
Well, this is, not gonna take that long.
No.
So I'd be willing to serve on it. But it'd be nice to have someone who's actually worked with something as well.
I'd be happy to serve on it, if I was to be honest with you.
All right.
Jeremy
All right.
Peter is my first one, Jeremy.
Conflict.
I
No.
don't think so. Don't have anything else going on that I'm not in business.
I know a couple of other attorneys that we can add to this that are in business that don't. Yeah.
Yeah, that's everybody on the board to give names.
I'd kind of like to stay close to this thing too, but I mean, we can't have 3 people on a subcommittee, can we?
We can't, and I'm just trying to think, you're on the legislative subcommittee, you're on the strategic planning subcommittee, you're both on the legislative, you're on the hiring,
And still.
Sure.
and still on the housing.
Well,
I don't mind if you guys do it, I'm just offering up to participate.
I just want to stay close to this issue. I feel really strongly about this choice. Really strongly about this choice.
I'll do it with you, Steve.
I'm fine with that.
That's
I just
cool.
wanna-
That's cool.
Okay, I'd entertain a motion to put Steve and Buzz on subcommittee and give them authorization to move forward with the RFP process.
I would make a motion to put Buzz and Steve on the committee,
Subcommittee.
subcommittee, sorry. What the other name for-
Is there a second?
Second.
Any public comment?
Yes, I do.
Chief,
As a public entity, I'd be very concerned to be only sending the RFP to a selected list. Because criticized, you're not only to public opportunities to find it. I focus much more information, much more on very restrictive RFP language, and that way you can filter out any attorney that applies to it. But I think you can be sued for not allowing someone to apply for a position.
And that, I appreciate you bringing up that point, and I guess as a follow-up, I think we have to post this on our website and make it available, to send it out to every attorney.
No, you don't do
Yeah.
that. Some oddball that come out.
Yeah, so we'll make sure that
Great.
this RFP is posted to our website, and any and all are welcome to review and respond to it. We're trying to focus a list on, okay.
Let's make sure we get a proposal from John Meyer of the Cottonwood Environmental Law Center.
Yeah. Okay, we have a motion seconded. Any further public comment? Any further board discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Okay. Next order of business, staffing structure. We discussed this last board meeting, and today is an action item. And Whitney will correct me if I'm wrong, but today we need a motion to allow the subcommittee, the hiring subcommittee, which is Sarah and myself, to move forward with hiring the admin assistant as well as outsourcing the bookkeeper, and give us the board's permission to pursue those two.
So moved.
So we moved. Is there a second? Is there any board or any public comment on this agenda item? Hearing none, any board discussion?
Sure.
Yeah, let's get going.
Okay, calling the vote. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Moving on, next business item or old business item is 2019 legislature. Consider involvement in draft bill pending for infrastructure. We have in our board packets a draft agreement with the Taylor Luther Group. For those that aren't familiar, the Taylor Luther Group is the lobbyist that we worked with the last legislative session. The way the contract is drafted, it would be joint between West Yellowstone and the Big Sky Resort Area District.
And
it's, excuse me?
Mark is on the line, just so you know.
Oh, Mr. Taylor, how are you?
Good morning, everyone.
Mark, can you hear
How
us?
are you? I can, thank you.
Maybe not.
And certainly, Kevin, I'm available for any questions you or any of the other members have
Mark
regarding. Kevin, this is Mark. Can you hear me?
Maybe he stepped away. He's been here the whole time.
Well, I was hoping Mark would walk the board through the scope of the agreement, but until he joins, I'll give the general flavor for the members of the audience. It is a $50,000 fee, but the way that it's structured is it's in different increments. $5,000 would be due upon execution of the contract, and that would get us a draft bill. $12,000 would be payable January 1, assuming, and that's an assumption that the draft bill is what we're supporting. And then there would be another payment due February 1st of $12,000, and the final $20,000 would only be due if the bill is enacted into law. So it's a reward at the end. Hopefully Mark can join.
Kevin, I'm on the line. Can you hear me?
I hear him.
There he is.
Mark, can you speak up again?
Hello, everyone. I've been able to hear everything that's been stated by Kevin, so I've been on the entire time.
Cool.
And I'm
Mark,
here to answer any questions, although I'm getting a little bit of an echo, and I apologize for not being there in person today.
That's all right. Before we go into questions, is there any other comments or points you'd like to make out about this agreement? Mark, that was a question for you. Sorry.
Got it. You know, what we tried to do is layer into this process a couple things. One is there's some stop gaps. You know, just breaking the contract apart. Obviously, going through the drafting process. It's structured with the client being both the Big Sky Resort Area District and the town of West Yellowstone. So I want to emphasize that we wouldn't move forward unless both clients were comfortable with the draft language as submitted to the legislature. The other thing that I do point out is the third payment would not be due unless the bill actually was enacted into law. So the obligation, assuming a decision is made to move forward, is really ultimately $30,000 with a $20,000 effectively a contingency built into the document.
Mark, this is Mike Scholes. Could you give us an idea just on the timing and such, when the draft legislation has to be completed by? Do you see it to be advantageous to try to introduce this bill early as opposed to later? You know, what are your initial thoughts so that we know what kind of a timeline that we would be up against and helping you get this process rolling?
Sure. My strong preference, based in part from last cycle, is to move forward and get this bill introduced fairly early in the legislative process. The good news from a drafting perspective is there's been, you know, significant work that's been done historically that has been approved by this board. Obviously, you know, inserting the town of West Yellowstone into the mix, there has to be some consideration there as well. But I think getting stuff put in to the session be prepared to introduce the bill the last week of January, I think makes a lot of sense from my standpoint. There is a bill placeholder out there, and so we do have some of those procedural things are already in place as we work through and finalize the drafting elements of this, and ultimately making a collective decision as to who's the primary bill sponsor, et cetera. But those are all things that we can collectively work through over the next 2 to 4 weeks as we finalize things. But if you recall, Mike, from 2 years ago, waiting until February and to really introduce the bill, I think is too late in the process. So we should really target that 3rd to 4th week of January.
Thanks, Mark. Steve.
Mark, Steve Johnson, I wanted to ask if we have any sponsor identified or a candidate list of who might sponsor this?
Sure. So again, because there's multiple clients in this, we'd have to have the conversation with the town of West Yellowstone. We would want to also have a conversation about where we wanted to start this. We've got a lot of support historically from your local delegation, both on the Republican and Democrat side. Obviously, Senator Hinkle did not win his reelection, and Pat Flowers is the new senator representing that district. Kerry White's historically supported it, but I could also see Senator Wellborn playing an integral role in it as well. It makes logical sense to start with those guys, perhaps Ray Shaw, but Ray's not the strongest. I mean, his strengths are in other areas, but I could see going back to Jeff in the Senate and Kerry in the House.
Real quickly, Steve, I would like to understand, are we proposing to split this 50-50 with West Yellowstone? I get a tentative nod from the West Yellowstone delegation. And Mike, real quickly, I just wanted to hear, this is a two-party agreement, and joining us today is Dan Sabalski, who is the city manager for the town of West Yellowstone. Dan, do you have any thoughts on this contract? And
from looking it over, like you said, there's 50,000. I know the town has got that budgeted already, so that process is taken care of. I know to try to get, I think there was a dated January 1 for $5,000, or is it 12,000. I don't know if we can make that. It may have to go to the second week in January because we had our last council meeting this week. So the next one will be sometime. We're trying to reschedule that because conflicts with councilmen, so that would either be the first or second week in January. So just to let you know that.
Oh, we can make it.
yeah, we could make it.
Then that would work, and then we could send a check, or we just grab the next payment or whatever. But other than that, no. I mean, I think everything looks good.
Just a comment to discuss with the board. And of course, public comments welcome on this. I see this having to move forward similar to what we just did with both the subcommittee of the hiring subcommittee. There has to be some power given to the legislative subcommittee on this, because this thing, if it moves very quickly, and it's I'm pointing that out, that I would certainly, we don't even have a draft bill to look at. This board doesn't, and so until we have a draft bill, it's hard to make a final determination on our support. And that would be the only check-in point I would ask for with the subcommittee, is once we have a draft bill, and then after that, let the subcommittee run. Mike?
I guess part of that, Mark, when would, when we, to move forward, we have to have agreement on the draft bill. When when is your drop dead date by having to have that draft ready? I know we did amendments last time to it that really helped postpone this and made it end up being at the end of the legislature or in the late February, as opposed to getting it done early. When do we need to have this draft approved by both of our boards for you to move ahead on your schedule?
You know, realistically, how I would envision this going is I would initiate the drafting process. I can, you know, in good faith and you know, obviously subject to approvals by your respective governance entities. I can, over the holidays, because I have, I'm basically locked in for the session. I'll actually do a chunk of drafting and present a draft or get it ready for whoever the reviewers are from the respective entities. But I think what we really need to do is have approvals be ready in that, you know, second to third week time frame.
Dan wants to talk.
Mr. Sabelski. One thing I should have mentioned is our timeline for the meetings. We can have a special meeting because this is one of my priorities that have been given to me by council. So we can do that with, I believe, a 48-hour notice. So whatever it takes to move it forward, we can make it happen.
Well, in terms of approving this contract, we got to approve it and you got to approve it. And we can do that today, but you can do that.
I would have to go back and check, but soon.
Soon,
I'll make it
okay.
happen.
But again, we both have to sign on to this thing to give Mark the comfort that he's hired to do the work.
Correct. So Mark, you're hearing that back and forth. Obviously, some of these dates are going to have to be adjusted to accommodate the West Yellowstone Town Council meeting schedule. But it sounds like you could maybe do a meeting the first week of January. I doubt your council wants to meet next week, but early the following week, perhaps.
Sarah has.
Yeah, we can certainly make those adjustments in the agreement like that. I do think it will be important, though, just from a timing standpoint, to start, you know, even on my side, starting to put together a draft version that once the approvals are made and the decision is, I'm assuming, made to move forward in the review process, so that we can, you know, almost work in a couple different threads here. One is just kind of contract formality. The other is going through the drafting kind of review and approval process.
Okay. Sarah?
So if we wanted out, but Wes wanted to stay in, do we have an out? Like if we decide that we don't like the draft, I just want to make sure that we have a clear out.
He said both parties had to agree.
Okay. And then what I think I heard you say is that you want to see the draft to kind of get the board behind it before we give the subcommittee kind of the authority to run with it. Is that did I understand that correctly?
Yes, I think that it's important for this board to see what the bill is we're supporting, but after that point, it's run.
Okay, I agree. I just wanted to make sure. I feel a little uncomfortable going for it without knowing what it
Without
is.
having
And,
something
I
right.
mentioned that at the last meeting. So I just wanted to make sure everybody would get a chance to see it and voice their opinion.
I would say that's, you know, that decision to go forward would not be made by the subcommittee.
Right.
It needs to be made by the
Right.
board if it takes a special, meeting or whatever.
Right.
We'll have to do it as a board, and we'll kind of do but we can work with them on drafting to try to get it to the position, but that can all be modified at that meeting. But to my earlier point, we need to really pay attention and make sure that's the bill we want. So we're not trying to amend it because it has to go back to the legislative office and they rewrite it and everything else. That's how it gets moved down to when we
That's how
can't
it
get
becomes a
anything
camel.
passed. So we have to, that's why it has to be a board decision, and we all have to make sure that we know that this is what we're gonna be working with and not keep redoing it.
But real quickly, Steve, just we have a meeting scheduled for January 9th. Mark, would that work with the timing on this, that we would have a bill to review on January 9th? If not, we're gonna have to schedule it. I mean, if that's too late based on the timing, then we would have to meet the first week of January. That's a question mark. Is January 9th too late for us to review a bill and make a decision?
No, it's not. I think assuming there's a decision to move forward, I can date the contract provisions and all those sorts of things, but as long as there's approval to move forward with the drafting review process or that thread, I think we'd be in good shape.
Okay. Steve?
I just wanted to comment on the drafting process. I mean, I presume the drafting is going to reflect on what was drafted at the last session and work, from that, together with some learnings from the last session about what went well and what didn't go so well. So that, Mark, please feel free, or I'm asking you to comment on this, and frankly, Dan, too. I mean, we ought to be able, based on the history at the last session, to come up with something that looks like more of a winner, I would think, based on that experience than, what happened last time. Mark?
Yeah, ultimately, you guys get to make the decisions, and in terms of what's in the bill and what's outside the bill. Just as a general observation based on the election results, the bill last session, tied on a 25-25 vote in the Senate, and 3 of the no votes in the Senate have been replaced with people that I would think would likely vote for this. Just as a kind of a general election lay of the land assessment, I think the Senate looks more favorable than it did on this issue 2 years ago. Conversely, the House, if you look at what the governor's amendments were, the House overwhelmingly approved that version 2 years ago. So it's really a decision for you guys whether or not if it's just infrastructure or if it's infrastructure and something else. Obviously, 2 years ago it was workforce housing, and that's really just a decision for you guys to make in the and if you want to give me even direction today, I can take that into account in the drafting process as I'm putting that together. So it's really a fundamental question of whether or not is this just an infrastructure purpose or what the actual purpose of the additional 1% would be. I'm presuming it's infrastructure in some capacity based on
hold on one sec. Sorry to interrupt you. We know West Yellowstone has talked about infrastructure. And then I'm looking at Dan. That's the main need in West Yellowstone. And I guess rather than drafting the bill in this meeting, I'd like to let the subcommittee work with the subcommittee from West Yellowstone and work on this and get something to us. Steve?
I just would like to say in this meeting, my personal opinion is we can go for a 1% increase and not stipulate it as for anything. Just a flat 1% increase in the resort tax, period. When you limit it to infrastructure, you kind of pre-categorize how you're going to manage that on a going forward basis, and priorities change. So, I mean, there is an alternative that may have its advantages or may have some disadvantages, but I think we should talk amongst ourselves in terms of what we pursue here. I mean, we need more money, and how we use it can be decided later. If it's easier to get legislation through by associating it with infrastructure, fine. If it's easier to get it through by not associating it with infrastructure, I think we should be cognizant of that and focus on, improving our chances, whichever we feel has the better shot.
Great, and I assume that will all be discussions with the West Yellowstone Subcommittee
Yeah.
and our lobbyists, and you'll propose, Mike.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, that we need a lot of input from Mark and his team because they know the legislators much better than we do, even those of us that have spent a number of days with them that have it. So I think that will all be somewhat in the discussion we have to get this finally drafted, and that plus, Mark, as he said, there's a few different people and such, but it seemed in the past, that's why there was amendments made in the committee and that on getting some of the definitions in place and such. Some people definitely wanted it limited, some don't. I think also keep in mind that whatever we do to it, you'll find out what the people, members of the committee in that want, because they will amend it on you.
Oh, yeah.
It's not about just what we always have. This got amended, or it got amended last time and such. So I think we want to, look at both the realities and remember that we're designing this for all the resort tax districts, just not ourselves. And that's one side of the coin. The other side is the political side, and we have to balance through all that, and our lobbyists will help us make those decisions.
Well, and I'm reacting to something I read a while back about just preliminary to this session. There are a whole bunch of things that are associated with infrastructure, and one of the interesting debates is, okay, what is infrastructure? And I'd ask Mark to comment on that, but I mean, we can avoid getting tangled up in the definition mess and let individual resort communities and areas decide that later on. It might make it easier to get through the legislative process by just avoiding that fight.
Okay, so yes, and I just feel that this is going to be a three-way conversation, Wes, you guys, and our lobbyists, and then we'll have something to do. So unless
just one last thing. Mark, Pat Flowers is well known both in Big Sky and in West, and I think pretty well regarded as a friend. I know this is his first session and so forth, but I think he'd be very willing to step up to the plate on this, and if that is useful, I just offer that comment.
Okay. I would entertain a motion to approve the government affairs contract with assuming the dates will be changed according to West Yellowstone's meeting schedules, and assuming that this board will have a bill to look at our January 9th meeting prior to this moving forward. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Somebody say so moved.
So moved.
The motion, is there a second?
Second.
Is there any public comment on this agenda item?
Are you going to read Brian Hubbard's submission from this morning?
Where did the submission come through?
He said he emailed a letter to you all.
I have it. I can read it. So we're sorry. We do have. Thank you. We did get an email public comment from Brian Hurlbut. It's a Big Sky Citizens. It says, "Hi Chris, and I was going to come down to the meeting today and speak during the public comment, but I forgot that it is my daughter's Christmas program at the school at 10. So I'd like to personally, not part of the Arts Council of Big Sky, personally support any legislative effort to enable our local resort tax board to allow the community to vote on a potential percentage increase for future housing and infrastructure needs in Big Sky. I believe this just gives us another tool to use as we face these needs in our growing community." Thanks for reminding us of that. Is there any further public comment?
I'm with the Gallatin River Task Force. Kristen not be here today. I'm just morning. Again, I think it's the same situation, but my name is Ryan Newcomb, and I'm new director of development, and thank you all for your support of the organization. We're taking this to our board to adopt a formal position on it in January, and so we wanted to make sure that you were aware of that, and hopefully we'll have news of a formal position that we can take in front of you all and the community at that point. That's
Thank you. Welcome to the community.
Thank you.
Is there any other public comment? Let's try.
In light of Brian's letter, I'm taking both the chamber and Visit Big Sky top hat and tiara off. And I want to speak on behalf of the Big Sky Community Housing Trust. But that group, with Brian as a member as well, would like to voice their support for this ongoing effort. As Brian said, now talking chamber and Visit Big Sky, we will be visiting on this topic once you all make a decision here in our January board meeting.
Okay. And Mr. Sabal.
Council has made this a priority. I know at the last meeting, I kind of discussed our infrastructure needs. Right now, we're facing the possibility, which is overwhelming probably, that we will have to build a wastewater treatment plant for our town. Probably in the next, well, it would have to be completed in 3 or 4 years. We have to redo all our sewer lines. A lot of our roads have issues with, and you know, we've had a moratorium on development for commercial development based on water, but we're in the same position with sewer. So as you can tell, we're in great need. We're trying to provide infrastructure as a community of about 1,300 people for probably 10 to 12,000 people per night. So this is important. You know, they'll do in terms of having the meetings and that. Actually, I was just on my cell phone trying to set up a meeting for January 3rd. So I think that will happen so that we can probably take action for this. So.
Great. Any other public comment? Hearing none, board discussion. Mike.
One is that, you know, go ahead and through assigning this and that, but we should talk among ourselves if we have other contributors from other housing resorts, how we pass that, how do we get that involved, their money involved in it. We have one, like Gardner has mentioned, to put it into their budget and such. We can discuss it later, but somewhere if we can add other contributions, we'll have to figure out the mechanism to help that pay this so that it's some way it has to circulate through.
We should immediately make all the other resort entities in the state aware of what we're doing.
And ask for contribution.
I agree. We should pass that.
Well, I mean, it's in their interest. Yeah. And I mean, we also need their input. I mean, as we were talking, as Mike was talking, I mean, we draft legislation, it's going to affect everybody. Yeah. We don't want to.
Well, we need their support at the legislature as we had last time and such. And I think what, you know, also just needs reiterated, especially since we have the press here and such, that the bill that we're going out after is not an increase in our tax. That it is the right for each of the resort tax communities to draft a petition to put before their electorate to vote on, and those in the petition that will specify how the funds are used within the parameters of the law. It's in no way a tax at all. It's just giving us the right to decide how we want to pay for some of the things that are coming down the pike in all of our communities.
Good. Is there any further board discussion? I'm going to take a minute to expand upon Mike's thoughts. So, and this is following some of the recent coverage. I would just like to make it very clear. This is just enabling legislation. The only thing this legislation would allow is for the citizens of Big Sky and the resort tax communities to vote on this issue. We know West Yellowstone, Gardner, and Virginia City want to pursue legislation, so this is happening with or without us. And my personal opinion is I'd like to be involved because any resort tax legislation affects this community, and I think it's important for Big Sky to be involved. I keep hearing that Big Sky is striving to be a world-class community. And when I think of a world-class community, that means we need to have world-class infrastructure and social services to support a world-class community. That includes water and sewer, workforce housing, transportation, environmental stewardship efforts, as well as all the social services that are provided by this board. Just at our last meeting, we heard of $22 million needed to fix our water and sewer issues, and that $22 million just meets the existing commitments that the Water and Sewer District Board has. that does not allow for any expansion of that district or capacity in that district. And I'm convinced that the expansion is necessary to solve our other big crucial community issue, which is workforce housing. Today, we know we're 400 to 600 units short on workforce housing in this community. We know we have a $22 million water and sewer problem, and all this is leading towards what the Resort Tax Board has recently embarked on, which is a strategic plan for this community over the next 10 years. It's going to be a 10-year strategic plan. That process will happen over the next year. I think all of this will come to light during that process. There's been hearing some concerns of some community members on it. It's what's the money going to be used for? What are the needs? And to me, that is really going to be blatantly obvious when we work on this strategic plan. And I wish we had all our I's dotted and T's crossed, but that will never happen. We need to just get this tool in our toolbox so that it is even an option for this community. The other criticism that I've heard is that we are not collecting all the taxes that are currently due to the Resort Tax Board. And this came up in context of the Airbnb and VRBOs. I want to stress that this Resort Tax Board is doing everything we can technologically and legally available to collect the taxes that are due to us. There are always going to be, this board can attest, there's always things that pop up about whether or not it should be taxed or not. We continue to work on that, and it's a never-ending issue, and we are always striving. And since I've been on this board is taking a great burden on themselves to make sure that we are collecting the taxes that are due, and that is a big priority for this board. We've made some decisions with the staffing to really go after that, so I believe we're making all the necessary steps to address those issues. This strategic plan and that we're working on and the legislation would be necessary prior to bringing it to a vote of this community. We have a lot of work to do. So I will stress any increase in resort tax, it's a community decision, and it will be a community decision. And the way to make it a community decision is you let the electors or the electorate vote on this issue. All this legislation does is bring it to a vote of the citizens of Big Sky. So I will call the vote. Steve.
Just a couple of comments.
Yeah.
The $21.7 million that Water and Sewer put on the table, that's just the first step. They have a list beyond that that also has money associated with it. And yeah, I think relevant to your point about this is going to go back to the electors. Ultimately, that is going to be put to the electors in the form of various bonding issues to fund that. Now, who does the bonding and how much and what the participation is remains to be determined, but it will all go back to the electors to decide whether or not we want to take on that debt to do that project, those projects. And just one last point, money is an important tool in the toolbox, but we need more tools in the toolbox than just money to pull this off. And I think that's going to become increasingly evident as we go through the strategic visioning process. I mean, money is important, but it ain't the only thing. You got to manage it legally and well, and there are tools that need to go in the toolbox to pull that off too.
Is there any other board comment? Call the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. All right, Mr. Taylor, I believe that is all we have for you.
Kevin, one thing for you to consider, I know you mentioned a subcommittee, and if whoever is being appointed, if they want to just reach out to me, I'm happy to make the tweaks to the agreement and work with whoever the board designates to be the contact point.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mark. We have a subcommittee already formed. It was originally formed to work on the defensive legislative issues. It's Mr. Steve Johnson and Mr. Mike Schultz, so they'll be working with you. And then we'll wait to hear from Dan, who will have from West to work with you on it. Okay, moving on to, is there any other old business?
You know, just as far as this contract, since we need to get it going, Dan, I'll contact you and get your changes that you need on it. Steve, give me any changes that he has. So I'll get that to you, Mark, the first of next week at the latest.
Sounds good. Thanks,
Okay.
Mike.
Okay, hearing
Merry
no,
Christmas, everyone.
No,
Same to you, Mark.
hearing no other old business, we'll move on to new business. Is there any other new business? Hearing none, is there any final public comment on items that were not on the agenda? Or hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
All in favor? Aye. Aye.
Real quick here.